So our next speaker, our first speaker of the evening, and ambassador, is someone who shared his story with us in, I think I've written June 2023. June the 14th, your story went out, Harrison, mate. So not that long ago. However, it feels like I've known you for ages. In that time, you've done loads. You're everywhere, mate. I don't know how you do it. And honestly, a huge, huge inspiration. Now, Harrison is, well, the theme of tonight is the power of the outdoors. And Harrison represents that perfectly. So instead of me talking about Harrison, I may as well let Harrison talk about Harrison and all things outdoors. So, Harrison, I'll just have you take the stage.
Thank you very much, sir. Yes, thank you for having me, and thank you for everyone for joining this evening. Yeah, I think I did the podcast with Tales to Inspire just before the production value went up hugely, so I missed the chance to get the lovely video lunch experience. But it was a great chat nonetheless, and as Chris alluded to, it seemed definitely sort of kindred spirits in that way. So that's 1 minute of my time used up. So life story in 14 minutes. Here we go, I guess. But my name is Harrison Ward, also known as the Fell Foodie. Now, for those in the north, we tend to call the hills fells up here. For those that aren't in the north, you may be wondering what the hell that is. It doesn't mean I fell over. It's an alliteration, really, of two words merging two passions of mine for cooking in the outdoors, in the fells, and that love of food. So these days, I'm best known for going up into the mountains with a small little camping stove, trying to recreate restaurant-style dishes on minimal equipment, really. Just as a bit of a quirky, eccentric hobby, getting some weird onlookers from passers-by, but it's something that I quite enjoy, being out there, taking my little passion outdoors and that love of food into an environment that gives me a lot of peace and a lot of solace out there. But life wasn't always this way for me. I mean, back through sort of my teenage years, I found myself going from being this quite, exuberant, sort of happy-go-lucky child to really overnight going through this sensation of quite sort of demotivation and quite self-loathing and very self-critical and not really knowing what was going on at the time, not really having any role model as such to really work out what was going on there, not speaking out about the issues I was suffering from. And I guess the internet being in its infancy back in the day as well, not being able to sort of research and search for perhaps similar people going through other issues. It seemed very much something that became a cross to bear for me, something that I didn't really know what was the next steps, but didn't want to really put on anybody else by being this burden, sharing my struggles, really ruining somebody else's day with what I was going through is how it sort of felt. So I basically swallowed this down. I guess I became very good at wearing a mask. I've been quite the thespian, supposedly, I suppose, putting on this mask each day, pretending everything was rosy, being a bit of sort of the joker, trying to always make somebody else's day better, which gave me that little bit of life, a little bit of joy that I was going through. But internally, again, very sort of self-destructive, at times battling with my own existence, sort of suicidal ideations, and not really seeing any sort of purpose in my life whatsoever. Now, around this time, I found myself working quite a lot alongside my studies in the hospitality trade. So I got my first job around 13, just to really get a few pennies, probably to buy a few more PS2 games back in the day, or various bits in there, something to help me help my mum with the £10 pocket money I used to occasionally get, and began washing pots in a local pub around the corner from where I was. Now, this was kind of sort of the first interaction I had with the commercial side of things with food, but I'm very much not trained, just completely self-taught in the cooking side, but sparked a love of food really, just from memories, I guess, of the family gathering around the table, usually on that Sunday lunchtime vibe, coming together, sharing stories, and the real sort of conduit that food was for conversation. It quickly became associated with good times for me, seeing family for the first time in a long while, hearing sort of those good stories and catching up really with other people. So it became a bit of a scholarship that I went through, a self-scholarship, if you will, watching a lot of programs on television, cooking programs, reading lots of cookbooks, and always sort of striving to find out more ingredients and more cuisines from around the world, because that kind of felt like quite a happiness tool for me, food. So not only for myself, perhaps maybe enjoying it too much at times, where the comfort eating side of things too, but also again appreciating the craft that went into that and maybe the skill set to it. But alongside my studies in the pub trade, I worked up through the years. So at 15, began working waiting on at a local hotel, and at 18 began working behind a bar, now able to sort of dispense alcohol, being legally able to do so. Now, of course, in this country, very much that sort of rite of passage with alcohol again, thrust into that world at 18. That's it. What we're going to go do, down to the pub, off to the nightclubs, drink ourselves away, that's sort of it the next sort of time. Who we're going to meet in those settings, it's all going to be fueled around alcohol, social lubricant, all that side of things. And I wasn't someone that was really, down the park with a bottle of cider in my younger years. I wasn't someone that was ever held away from alcohol either, but certainly wasn't someone that really embraced that sort of culture until I really turned 18. So working behind that bar introduced me to a whole different world of people from all different walks of life. And I really enjoyed that sort of social aspect of it. I enjoyed meeting new people. I've always been quite a social person in that sort of way, but also enjoyed really the sensation and the feeling that a couple of drinks after work was giving me. Again, having struggled with my mind at this point for about 5 years already in silence, it gave me a bit of sort of a comfort blanket in a way, that sort of feeling of shutting off, that maybe that Dutch courage, that social lubricant as mentioned before, allowing some of those thoughts to really get put in the back burner and provide a bit of silence almost in my own head. So in the early days, of course, tolerance was very, very low, stumbling home after a shift after a couple of drinks, but began wanting more and more of that sort of sensation, going out more and being very socially acceptable, especially that sort of young adult, young bloke, bigger build as well, maybe rugby bravado type thing, became very much an easy part of my life. So I took on more jobs in the pub trade alongside my studies, and before long I was regularly going out most nights of the week, finding different pockets, different groups, perhaps friends or acquaintances, or even just punters that used to come in the pub to drink with. Again, all under that guise of really being social. But for me at this point, I was kind of seeing it as a bit of a medical, sort of a medicinal tool for me too, silencing those thoughts. Again, something I still hadn't shared with anybody else, still suffering through those issues. Now, around 19, a year late, didn't just sort of decide what I was doing in my life studies wise. I went to college after sixth form for a bit, switched my direction, but ended up applying for university. And again, managed to get my offer to go to university very late in the end. I think I didn't actually think I'd got in at first. The letter came literally on a Friday when the course started Monday. So it was a real sort of switching point in life, moving away to York, moving away from Cumbria, where I was originally from, very sort of rural upbringing, country pubs, now all of a sudden to what was quite a big city for me, really. About as big as I wanted to go, in honesty, but very much an eye-opening experience for a lad from Cumbria. And moving away to York, I was quite sort of seasoned in this sort of lifestyle I was in. So again, just like that rite of passage at 18, meeting again for sort of Freshers Week in university. Again, it's all fueled around the student union, into the clubs, mixing with people, drinking away, breaking down those sort of social barriers with a little bit of alcohol. So again, a lifestyle I fell completely into very easily. But of course, I'm still using this in its different means for my own personal benefits at this time. So a couple of months after sort of the university things, everyone's sort of settling down, everyone's getting more into the study side of things, they're building routine, where I'm still very much on this mode of kid in a sweet shop. Now all of a sudden I've got about 360 pubs in walking distance for me, open till all hours of the evening. Very different to what I was used to. And now my tolerance is greatly increased at this point. So I found myself getting a job back in the pub trade quite quickly. Again, really to sort of fund this sort of lifestyle in a way. I didn't have any support sort of from rich parents or various bits of there. My mum was a sort of single parent nurse, and so it was very much sort of having to fund that side of things myself, but also this other affliction that I was going through. And around sort of maybe the end of that sort of year, going towards my sort of 20s, I was now really beginning to snowball into this sort of demise. I mean, physically, it was quite noticeable how much I'd changed. I was drinking sort of at this point, sometimes in excess of sort of 20 pints a day at this point. I'd taken up smoking full time and had ballooned in weight to about 22 stone. It had literally become my sole focus in life, this constantly reaching out for another drink each day. Literally, my sole focus every morning I woke up, to the point where I was brushing my teeth with the stuff, completely skipping away my studies, managing to keep this sort of job in the pub trade, but very highly functioning in that lifestyle. And literally any moment that I wasn't working was the other side of the bar, just drinking this away. And really constantly trying to hit that point of shut off in my own head. And that tolerance had built so much over this time that that moment of perhaps euphoria, or even sort of that sort of a ethereal state that I enjoyed getting to, was so far away at this point now, to the point of blackout, that most days it would just be drinking on repeat, on cycle, not really achieving that shut off that I wanted. And it was kind of putting myself on ice. I didn't really want to be here. I didn't really want to, had no aspirations for myself. I'd kind of battling through this idea, the fact that, I was just existing most days, but wanting to almost be present for the fact that other people in my life, there'd be great pain on others if I sort of did anything untoward. So it was very much something that for me was just getting through each day possible, just basically drinking myself to complete blackout each night and starting again that cycle all days. And of course, never really reaching those same heights that I achieved in the first point. And around my 21st birthday, I had a lot of friends come to visit me for a particularly big celebration, as is usually the case for these birthday milestones. A particularly long drinking session, which was quite run of the mill for me back then. And one by one, these friends began to go home back to their respective cities where they lived in the UK. And on sort of the fifth day, it really began to dawn on me sort of how alone I was in this city. I spent each day, I mean, I had plenty of friends and plenty of acquaintances, but, you know, a lot of my friends were perhaps bartenders or takeaway owners. It was kind of really, the signs were maybe there for the way my lifestyle was going. But really, ultimately, everything was revolving around the drink, whether it was the jobs time, whether it was the people I was meeting at lunchtime in the daytime, as opposed to those coming after work who'd come out 4 or 5 o'clock to have a couple of drinks. They'd then go home, meeting an evening crowd. They'd then go home, and I'd just be drinking through all these groups. They wouldn't know the extent of what I'd been drinking beforehand. It just appeared like I had a couple of drinks, when in reality, it was the minute I'd got up to the minute I went to bed, or the minute I sort of fell into bed, or even in the street, really. On the way home, this constant cycle. And I felt like it was no longer providing that escape for me anymore. And I was quite reclusive, sort of. I didn't like to be contacted. I didn't have a mobile phone. I struggled sort of relationships with my friends back home, keeping in touch with them, even sort of social media. I mean, very, very different to what I do these days. I mean, I didn't use any channels like that back then. And I made a call home in the early hours to my mum on a payphone near the house where I lived. I'd stumbled back from the nightclub in the early hours, about 4 a.m. I think I made 3 or 4 attempts on the phone to ring home before my mum woke up and answered this call. And I had one intention really on this call, and it was purely to say goodbye. I felt like I could go on no further. I felt like alcohol was no longer providing that escapism for me, and that really I sort of almost reached the point of, what was the point really here? I was kind of, I'd battled through, and who am I battling through for? I'm just kind of not doing anything. I'm not moving forward, not progressing. But in honesty, I think it was really a bit of a call for help at the time. But I was rushed back to Cumbria, sought some sort of medical help. Obviously, it become clean sort of to my mum. Obviously, which came to a bit further family for the first time, really, in maybe 7 years at the time. What I perhaps been going through internally, but I wasn't willing to change at this point. So I booked a ticket back to York, back to the city, and continue this exact same lifestyle for another sort of 5 years. Almost pissed off with the fact that I allowed this secret out. I'd almost allowed a little chink in the armor. Sort of the foundations had crumbled slightly, and there was a way in. And now all I was getting was all this sort of, "Are you okay? And how are you in yourself? And how are you today?" And all this bother all the time, which I didn't want at all. It was kind of just me battling through this cross to bear, not really wanting to really put on anybody else. So I just carried on exactly how I was, drinking each day, drinking each day away, to the point when I found myself in a relationship about 5 years later. Now, this was something I'd really, really wanted, really longed for, to sort of share sort of things with somebody else and share sort of adventures, I guess, and life with. But really, at this point, I was already in one serious relationship as it was, and that was one with the alcohol. It was very much the point, my priority each day. I would put it before anything else, to the point where I had a lot of ultimatums from friends, from family, about perhaps my behaviour at times in this path. Now, I wasn't someone that was aggressive, or verbally or physically, but was certainly unreliable, would certainly let people down, and was certainly, I guess, a very different, maybe ill called tolerance at sort of social gatherings to those who were already around. And so this would also cause frictions in this relationship at times. Me working quite unsociable hours in the pub trade, her more 9 to 5 in sort of office-based job. And every time there was an argument, it would just make me just straight out into the drink, having a particularly heavy session, just not facing any sort of accusation or any point of really trying to build on from something or even apologize for a setting. And one particular occasion I went out, and under the influence, I acted unfaithfully to this partner. And rightly so, it was the end of that relationship. And by no means an excuse for me using alcohol in that setting, but the fact that I'd really felt like I'd compromised as a person, the fact I'd done something like this to somebody else. And I'd always wanted that sort of relationship and saw myself as quite an honest, loyal person internally. Yet this was exactly now the opposite of the person I was. And it really sort of dawned on me, that relationship cracking and those foundations really falling beneath me, how really far I'd fallen, how I'd changed as a person. I felt almost sort of possessed by this substance at this point, And it was on this point, on the 6th of June, 2016, that really for the first time I came to terms with the fact I was an alcoholic. This was now the one thing I'd put above everybody else, crawling over anyone to get this drink, stealing from various bits, working in the pub. I lived in the pub environment as well, so constantly striving for that next drink, and now losing something that really I'd always wanted the most, and putting that hurt on somebody else. And right back at the start, never wanting to be that burden, never wanting to put that pain onto anybody else, was the exact thing I'd done through my actions of trying to really alleviate those afflictions. So from that moment on, initially I was supposed to try and win that partner back, but I sort of vowed to really leave alcohol behind and try and move forward in my life. And I felt like I could no longer stay in that city in York to make this change. So overnight, I returned to Cumbria, where I was originally from, and came clean to friends and family on my personal Facebook page at the time, saying the reasons why I had to leave York, what I've been going through, my battles with really my own existence, depression is what I was diagnosed with at the time, and really my subsequent alcoholism from that moment forward. And to try and fill that void in my life, I tried to fill it with fitness. And initially, maybe it was just taking my old bike out the shed and various bits, going for a little walk, going back to the gym. And one friend turned up on my doorstep and said, "Do I fancy going for a hike one day?" I knew nothing what to expect at the time. I had no equipment to my name, again, was penniless with the debt I'd racked up with drink. Literally put on what I had to hand, an old pair of scabby trainers, some swimming shorts, and a jumper that I'd wear down the pub on a Friday. And he took one look at me and said, "You cannot go out hiking like that. I mean, look at the state of you. The boots, the shoes have got some grips of hair, bowling shoes." And he drove to the Lake District. I know I'm about time-wise, Chris. I'm going to speed up quickly here. Drove up past that outdoor store, grabbed this pair of boots off the shelf, and bought me these boots at the time in a huge show of faith and support for that moment. This is like the second week after I've come to terms with that breakdown. Again, grossly overweight, pining for my ex, going through the withdrawal. Again, not advisable going cold turkey on those amounts I was drinking, but it is what I did at that time. Threw my last pack of cigarettes in the bin. And 20 minutes later, he pulled up at the base of Blencathra in the Lake District. For those that don't know, one of the higher mountains in the area. And that moment of faith 20 minutes ago, I'm now staring up at this mountainside, thinking, what the hell have I got myself in for here? But basically getting frog marched up this mountainside, one foot in front of the other, absolutely blowing out my arse going up this hillside. But it was the start of a major change for me moving forward. Eventually reaching that summit point, without having a chance to take a breath, he turned to me and said, "We're off to do Helvellyn next week." And that was it. The third highest mountain in the Lake District, the same story, plugging on forwards in there. A week after that, Scarfell Pike. Within a month, we were up to Snowdon down in Wales. A month after that, Ben Nevis. I began sort of attempting to run at the time. I couldn't run a bath in the early days. I'd literally, probably a bit like now, to be honest, but began sort of running, and that sort of 2K became 3, became 5, became 10, and then somehow was convinced to sign up for a marathon at the turn of Christmas. And there I was in May, 11 months on from that turnaround moment, now crossing the line of a marathon. And just a huge show what was possible on that change, and a huge show of the support I had around me, and the privilege that I do feel really of having that support network around me. I do realize that is a privilege. At times I was given ultimatums, didn't have those people in my life nearly. And the fact they were there to pull me up from that moment, the moment I felt that, I was at that rock bottom moment, I didn't fear the judgment, I suppose, because at the point I had nowhere else to turn. But for so long, that fear of being that burden and judgment was the reason I was so silent. But it was the exact opposite, which is why I'm such an advocate now, I think, for talking about that stuff. If you don't have that support network, there is always somebody out there, whether it's medical professional, some of these fantastic charity helplines, the people on social media or groups like this. Don't suffer in silence. Do speak out about this. To really speed it along very quickly, these days, it's very much the path I'm on now, loving the outdoors, embracing that in my day-to-day life. Had some other struggles again through the COVID years, I think, still in routine, a lot of change going through that, now doing this sort of full-time as a speaker and touring around the cooking side of things. Still battling with the routine personally, but very much alcohol doesn't play a part in my life anymore. Coming up sort of 7 years sober this year. In fact, no, 8 years sober this year in June. But yeah, it's getting a while now, isn't it? No more cigarettes, and using those mountains most days for the outdoors, and really being such an advocate for time outdoors for physical and mental health. I'm over my time now. Very sorry about that. But I'll pass you on to another fantastic speaker, Isaac. But we'll welcome any questions you have at the end.
Thank you so much, Harrison. What a legend. Amazing. Honestly, So incredible. And I've already got a few people who've sent me some direct messages with some questions as well, Harrison. So yes, it looks like there's going to be a lot. So don't go anywhere, mate, because there's some coming through to you as well. So I'm going to introduce you to the next Tales to Inspire ambassador that we have this evening. Now, Isaac, you shared your story with us on the 15th of February. It went out in 2022. Once again, as Harrison said, before our production got good. I'm so sorry, Isaac, and sorry, Harrison. Cheers for plugging that, Harrison, mate. Always a positive. But yes, so I'm gonna introduce you to Isaac. Isaac, if you'd like to take the floor, mate.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Harrison. Great talk. I absolutely love hearing your story. For anyone else who doesn't know, Harrison and I are good friends. And it's always inspiring meeting people who have found a love for the outdoors and around mental and physical health. It's just people come from different angles sometimes into the outdoors. Mine is a different story to Harrison's. It wasn't through the same methods. But you will find the outdoors pretty much focused on environmental conservation projects. And there's a reason for that. It's not just about mental well-being for me, but it's also about getting outdoors to protect what we have. It didn't start that way. I've been seen as an overachiever of such, being able to have broken 6 world records in endurance sports, which has been quite a privilege, but it didn't start that way. I've also been able to be part of some prestigious organizations like the Royal Geographical Society and Scientific Exploration Society and all of these great places. But, none of this actually came to light until I made a pivotal change in my life. I guess the best way to start with my story is basically from the beginning. How was it when I was younger? So I come from Luton. If anyone knows where that is, it's kind of just north of London. It's like an urban town, usually voted as worst town in the UK, but I don't believe that, and I'm sure everyone from Luton doesn't believe that. But essentially, there wasn't quite a lot of what's it called? Opportunities in Luton when I was a child. It was very much an unsafe place. And often outdoors wasn't really on the minds of parents for their kids. It was, go to school, get them back in sort of thing, and try and keep them off the streets, to keep them away from gangs, that sort of thing. So the outdoors as a child wasn't really heavily featured in my life. And it wasn't something that I ever really turned to or got involved in. Things did change. So I was quite studious, and I was pretty good, apparently, according to the teachers. And they said, your son can go to university. He's got the ability to go. That's what they were saying at school. That means I would be the first in my whole family to have gone to university. So already overachieving and setting bar high. But that kind of is a bit of the story there. I've always had a high bar, if that makes sense. And we'll go into that and how that kind of made some real difficulties for me. Sometimes being overambitious can kind of bite you, and it certainly did for me when I went to university. I eventually got there, and it was also the start of social media and technology for instant communication and things like this, which ended up really playing to my weaknesses. So just for you all to get kind of an understanding of what I was like, I was very heavily indoors all the time. I was playing games all the time. I was very studious. I always wanted to get, high grades and do the best as I possibly could. And I often would stay, enormous amounts of time indoors, and sometimes never leaving the house for 3 or 4 days at a time. And it did come to head at university where you are not, blocked from working or overworking. So when I was at school, there was kind of school ended. At university, things were a bit different. You do your course, and then you can continue making your coursework, and things get better and better and better. And I ended up basically burning myself out based on my own sort of high bar that I set. And also because all social gatherings and things were starting to happen online, I ended up finding myself just absolutely glued to screens for hours and hours at any day. I think it was about 14 to 16 hours sometimes I was spending on screens a day. And essentially I wasn't really getting outdoors, getting daylight. And the only time I actually ever experienced anything that was outside of the house or the department that I was at university was this walk in the woods that I used to walk about 10 minutes through woodland. But essentially I was basically having incredible levels of anxiety over my grades, and also basically just working myself to the bone. And my anxiety got so bad that I ended up manifesting in all sorts of ways. One of which was, cutting out social life so I could work harder and achieve more. And so I started dropping a lot of my relationships. And other things that started to happen were I was so obsessed with my efficiency and my productivity, what a freaking ego I had, that I would not eat properly. I wouldn't cook, so I'd just grab something quickly, because I was like, well, cooking takes up too much of my time, blah blah blah. And then I also would sleep less. So there was all these things happening. And essentially there was a bit of an existential moment at university where I kind of saw, I don't know if anyone's ever had this feeling where you've kind of looked at yourself outside of yourself and what you're doing in your life. At that moment I was unaware of, if I'd seen daylight. I just felt so glued to the screens that I actually didn't know if I'd seen daylight on that day. And that was really shocking. And I felt this sort of existential crisis. I mean, some people call it midlife crisis. I was definitely having some sort of university crisis where I felt like I was living my life through this screen. So, like we're doing this talk right now, I can relive that. I can see myself talking to you on the screen, and the time is just ticking. I'm just looking at a screen, and I just envisioned myself for 16, 17 hours a day doing that. And it was really getting to me. It was absolutely just, it was a sort of a bit of a penny drop moment. I also started feeling like depressed about that and trapped, because I didn't know how to stop this. This was my lifestyle. This is what I was doing. I had these goals and I needed to achieve them, but I would not kind of break the cycle. So I wasn't breaking the cycle, and I just kept doing 16 hours, but knowing that I was sucking away my own life and not really enjoying it. And I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. I basically was losing purpose. I was just doing it because I set these goals, really high bar, and I basically was trying to achieve them. So then, life started taking a turn for me. I started having suicidal ideation. Things got really, really quite scary for me, because I was basically refusing to talk to people. I was very reclusive, not like I am now. I get to talk to all of you today, and do keynote speaking all over the place. But it's just incredible how different mental health can make you feel if you've got it really bad. And I had it quite bad. And then one of the course colleagues came up to me and he said, I think you should go out for a walk, mate. I think he was joking at me. Like I was just, no, I've got to get this done. I've got to get this done. And he was like, no, really seriously, I think you should get out. And he was noticing that I was just glued to the screen. And he was basically suggesting get out and go outdoors. So he said to me, go out, get outdoors and walk until your mind is clear. That was like, I remember that really vividly. And it was amazing that he was my support network, even though I didn't let him in, sort of thing. I was very much, anti everyone at that time. I just wanted to get this work done, but also hated everything. And I don't know what I did. I just listened to him. Something just said, this sucks. I hate what I'm doing. I listened to him. I went for a walk, and I went through some woods, and I carried on walking, and I entered in fields, and I carried on walking, and then I found a river, which is near where the university was, and I followed this river for absolutely, I think it was about 7 or 8 hours, something ridiculous. I just kept going and going and going. And the reason why I kept going and going and going, because the longer I was walking for, the more I could actually think about what I cared about. The racing thoughts stopped, everything, time slowed down, and I started to really feel very good with myself. And it was not rocket science. People obviously are listening thinking, yeah, that's obvious. But actually, when you're actually sucked into it, sucked into your own sort of goals and mindset, and technology is, it's adapted to hook you in, especially social media nowadays. It's actually really tough to come out the cycle. And I was definitely under a lot of techno stress at that time, and obviously it was manifesting in awful ways. But my spirits were lifting as I was doing that walk. And to be honest, I didn't know anything about mental health at this point. I had no clue what mental health was, but I just felt like my mind was clearing up and I could think about what I cared about at that time. So I kind of came back from that walk, obviously thanked my friend saying, I feel amazing. I don't know what you did to me. It wasn't any drug or anything like from the doctors or whatever, it felt amazing. So from that point, I was like, I need more of that. I'm going to do more of this. And I started noticing actually there was a bit of a pattern on those walks to the department where I said, I had a bit of a woodland walk, about 10 minutes. I started really savoring that a lot more, and then actually starting to grow it and do more frequent walks out of the department into the woodland. And it was just the power of nature healing me at this point. I was finding balance. So when I was at university, I was just basically unbalanced and life was not good. And then when I turned to nature, life was really good. So I wanted to incorporate the outdoors a lot more into my life. I kind of discovered it late. And I heard about all sorts of different sports and adventure sports that you can do. And some friends introduced me, a bit like Harrison, got taken onto mountains. I was also taken into different sports, like doing some running outdoors in the woods, and eventually meeting people who were interested in this stuff. And since that sort of turning point, I started to delve into the outdoor, and I guess you call it outdoor adventure world. And I just got hooked on it because the great thing about it was I was finding flow. I was finding something I actually enjoyed and was doing me a lot of benefit for my mental and physical health. And it gave me life balance. So from that moment forward, I kind of entered this world of adventure, but more of necessity rather than want or desire. It just transformed my life and I just wanted more of it. I hooked on it to get that sort of thing. As I did more adventure, I was so intrigued around what was happening to me that I wanted to treat it as an experiment. And I am coming from a science background. At university, I was studying science and geology, geoscience at the time. So being kind of hooked in science, I wanted to kind of treat my life as science. So I started experimenting with the outdoors and duration, time, interaction, and I started to really start going into the endurance stuff, endurance world, because I noticed that the longer I spent in the outdoors, the better I felt. And there was far more creativity and inspiration and energy that I was getting from doing sort of sports in the outdoors. And the longer I did it for, I felt more productive and more creative and inspirational to myself. I was like, wow, you're doing cool stuff. You're getting a lot out of this. So it started feeding itself. And instead of having that negative manifestation where I was doing more and more screen time and I was basically getting worse and worse and worse, with the outdoors, the more I did it, the better and better I got. So it was an interesting sort of an experiment. And I was reading all sorts of papers, like 20 minutes outdoors is a significant de-stress mechanism for a lot of people with mental health issues. And there was just more and more science that was coming to me where I was like, that just makes sense. That just makes sense. Why is this not normal in culture? Why is no one telling me this? Why is everyone saying, go on social media, get on social media, do the lights, start building your brand or a portfolio or whatever you do, this personal brand thing that everyone has on Facebook and stuff now. Why are we spending so many hours doing emails? Why we do? And it just felt like we're just zombifying ourselves, and the outdoors is the opposite. So I've entered into the world of endurance sports for basically a survival mechanism. When you go to a doctor or someone like that kind of gives you a pill, magic pill, you kind of feel you owe them, like, thank you so much for helping me, thank you for changing my life. Well, I had that feeling with nature, and that's why I started to think about ways I could protect and advocate to support nature. So since sort of delving into endurance sports over the years, and I've done some world record attempts and things like that, but it's all been part of the experiment, I've started to work towards protecting what protects me from a very selfish standpoint. but also understanding that the ecosystem we live in is actually is a lifeline for us. So not only is it important to, you know, support the outdoors and basically regenerate it, as because we're at the minute we're just depleting everything at such a crazy rate. It's not just important for us, but it's important for the, you know, the whole ecosystem to continue. And one of the things that I started to delve into was that, you know, our mental well-being or well-being is intrinsically linked with the well-being of the planet. So since sort of understanding and getting that sort of that link in my life and actually feeling the link rather than knowing the link. You can read about this stuff, right? The science is all there, but I actually emotionally felt that I, you know, I owe this world more than I can imagine. So I now start focusing all of my efforts on getting the message out there that we need to protect and conserve the planet in different ways, taking climate action, for instance, cleaning up plastic, or in business, you know, focusing your efforts on regenerating rather than taking if you can. I know obviously shareholders' profits gets in the way, but we still push. And the whole point is, what if nature disappeared? Would we all lose that lifeline? And I think that is one of the main sort of drivers and purpose for me right now. And that's where my story is taking me to. So now I focus all my efforts on that. And I've created a community interest company that basically focuses on this sort of this behavior change that reconnects people with the outdoors through team building, sort of eco-adventure experiences, we call it, where we take people out, they do adventures, but they also get hands-on with the climate, understand the damage that humans have done, but also understand what they can do, you know, from a personal action to help protect the planet. And this is all part of sort of a new mission and purpose that kind of came out of a rock bottom low and has led to all sorts of things, like talking on grand stages like the United Nations, COP conferences, and all sorts of places that I never imagined I'd be doing when I was butting my head to on a screen thinking to take my life at university. So there's my story, and there's where I am now and what I'm doing next. So I actually really welcome anyone to join me on the journey if they want to do any actions for the environment, for our own well-being.
Thank you so much, Isaac. Honestly, incredible. Just wow, mate, so good. And the thing is, like, and this is with even with Harrison and with Isaac, with both of you, even from when I interviewed you for Tales to Inspire, things have continued to change and develop at a remarkable pace. So as first of all, I just want to say a huge thank you to both of you. Isaac, amazing, and Harrison, just incredible. I've put links in the chat to both of them so you can find out more about both of them. But now it's really for the questions. I've got some messages here that have just come through. Thanks for sharing, Isaac. Really interesting story. We'll definitely be looking up your CIC. Literally sat here with tears in my eyes. What an incredible story. And then I've also, of course, if there is any, one of the questions I've got for you, Isaac, that's just come through. I've also got a comment here. The comment is, I'd like to share that I grew up in an urban environment. Like Isaac, I was a child and saw a grassy roundabout and thought it might be a great spot for a picnic. So a few times only a few times I saw fields or woodland, and I owe so much to the teachers of our school who took us on the field trip to a village. And it wasn't far, but it was miles from the landscape I was used to, of the flats and concrete playgrounds. I knew I had to leave the confines after that trip and did everything I could to expand my world. Travel really does broaden the mind. And just a comment there, really.
Wow, that was a bit of reconnection, and you decided to pursue that reconnection with the outdoors. I can't believe that you went on a roundabout.
Yeah,
that's well, that's just, you know, you just got to make do with what you have, right? That's amazing.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's like making do with what you have is a theme that's kind of come out of both of you sharing. But I've got a question here, and it's directed to you, Isaac, and the question is, is there any adaptations for disabled adventurers? Actually, it might be both of you as well, because Harrison will come involved with you both in the space. So adaptations for disabled adventurers.
Yeah. I mean, both Harrison and I know probably quite a lot of adventurers who are disabled physically, and also I guess there is neurodiversity. So I didn't actually say my story, but I have dyslexia, but I guess that doesn't change too much the situation. But there is adaptations. I'm seeing a lot more in the UK where they're starting to make accessible journeys so that people can go up into wild spaces through wheelchairs. I'm seeing a lot more physical, I guess, adaptations to getting people and accessibility for people to get into the outdoors. A lot more needs to be done, I have to say. But I know a lot of great, inspiring disabled adventurers who are actually rocking it in terms of getting more accessibility for disabled access into these wild spaces, but also just from making accessible sports. I've seen incredible inventions that people have made for physical disability to get themselves into these outdoor spaces as well. Yeah, I think, Harrison, do you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Just echo what you say there, Isaac, really. I think it can often be something when you're not from that particular position, I guess, difficult to sort of see that other side, or perhaps the barriers that are in place for those moments. But doing a lot of work with sort of school groups out there, various sort of accessibility, I think, is always as much of almost a disability in the outdoors as well, in a way. People actually get into these locations at times through financial stresses or through no means of transportation or the knowledge gap at times. So I think that is a barrier that, again, still needs to be broken down too. But again, it's something that I think there's some fantastic campaigns like Miles Without Styles, which is all about sort of walks for those in sort of motorized wheelchairs that can go without having to come across anywhere where they can't cross over a gateway or a fence in there. So some fantastic resources there. A lady called Debbie North, who kind of leads a lot of that side through. The Outdoor Guide as well has a lot in there. Sort of Julia Bradbury and her sister Gina Bradbury Fox. They do a lot of stuff from that side too, behind the Miles Without Styles routine as well. And again, I think when you sort of see more events in the outdoors as well, whether it's speaking events or social gatherings and stuff, generally been a lot more thought about, whether it's sort of the audio-visual style of things in there, whether it's accessibility in the place, whether it's about access with location and equipment as well. I think in there is definitely at the forefront, but as always needs a lot more on there, but perhaps needs the voices as well to sort of speak out, to make those bits known too, to make the bits forward. I think a lot of people are willing to make those sort of change and really power those movements forward. But sometimes I guess if they're not shouting up from those sides too, then of course it sometimes needs that side. But again, something I certainly advocate for, something I always try to sort of accommodate, certainly in any practices I bring in play. But these days, I think you are seeing so many people getting out the outdoors, and generally the outdoors is for all, in all walks. I mean, it doesn't have to be as a recovery tool for sort of poor mental health or physical health. It's just as a day-to-day practice. It's something that really, I think it's the place that we were designed to be in, and quite often we lose sight of that, whether through our upbringing or whether just through day-to-day societal means. But yeah, it certainly has a great impact being outdoors, even for a short space of time.
Amazing. Thank you, Harrison. So I've got a question that's come directly to me, and that question is essentially, the more you both do as public figures, the more assumed that you don't spend outside, or if you are possibly working in the outdoors as opposed to doing what you want in the outdoors. How do you both deal with that?
Well, I can go first, but I have strict rules. Yeah, so I understand that the more talking I do, I think I have to do, what, 20 talks a day if I wanted to. But, that's not healthy. I'm not, the whole point of my talk is to encourage people to get outdoors, right? And if I'm not doing it myself, what am I saying? So it's living true to yourself, but also I got into public speaking, and all of this was because from a mental health perspective, the outdoors has been very much my lifeline. So if I started to spend all my life indoors again, I mean, I would go back into the cycle that I had 10 years ago. So yeah, in answer to that question, I would have a bit of a strict balance with it all.
Thanks, Isaac.
Sounds like Isaac has certainly perhaps learned the lessons better than maybe I have in that sort of path, and does come across as a far more routined and structured chap than myself at times in this path. But I think 20 talks is impressive. I don't think I'd have enough time in a day to do 20 talks. I think I'd still be halfway through one by lunchtime. So that'd be a difficult one. But for me, I think getting into that space, I mean, these days it is what I do full time. The last 2 years, it was never an aim to get that way. Basically started for me when I set up an Instagram page and began sharing my story on there and having some wonderful opportunities like this or through local news, local publications to share that story further. And it was something that I wouldn't have shared in the mirror, as I alluded to in my talk at one point. So just taking those opportunities as they've come has really aided that. But in doing so, I think sometimes it can be quite a personal burden, I suppose, as well. Quite draining, quite emotionally draining, going through those darkest points or the lowest points all the time. And I think I touched upon at the end slightly in my talk that lockdown was quite a difficult phase for me. I think I felt very guilty for even feeling bad because I was here in the Lake District in very green space. There was people in far worse situations and also locations to be locked down in. But generally the same, the access to perhaps the vices, the positive vices I was using. I was a keen gymmer at the time. I'd be in the hills most days. We were getting told not to go in the mountains, but I put mountain rescue and various bits on there. Again, not being seen in the outdoors. The whole 30 minutes outdoors rule that was always bollocks, really. Never a gospel thing. And for me, I went quite reclusive again. I was working throughout lockdown. My hours went through the roof. Routine completely disappeared. And I think I basically fell back on some more negative vices. For the first time since I got sober, I was stuck in the own four walls again, really with no sort of outlet. And that was exactly what I used to drink on back in the day. But thankfully, I didn't fall back onto alcohol as a substance, but I certainly fell back on food. And I think food is something that's a huge passion point for me in life, but also a bit of a crux at times too. So it was something that I think I overate quite a bit. I wasn't getting the same exercise perhaps as bits. I mean, was one of the benefits, I think, when I was exercising so much is I could enjoy more food at times. But I perhaps did that without one of them. And again, you don't need to be a scientist like Isaac to work out that equation of what happened. For me, I think I started putting quite a bit on again. That then alludes some slightly different aspects in maybe a bit more lethargy, a bit more self, maybe awareness and insecurity of that sort of thing. And then suddenly getting thrust into the opportunity to go full time in this, basically via having the chances to take. And I think now there's a very lack of structure, I think, in my life. It's very much all over the place, lots of travel in there. So definitely, I think I'm still finding the balance of that speaking. I mean, quite often I'm speaking or doing outdoor cooking demonstrations whilst indoors in some big exhibition venue, which is always a bit ironic at times. But I think sharing that message is powerful in itself. But again, not forgetting you, I think, as a priority too. So I'm still finding that balance, but it's one that I'm aware of and one that, again, I still speak about. So I think, again, that's the important message, is not going back into the shell and becoming insular about those bits.
Thank you, Harrison. So next question I've got, this is a really quick one, actually, I assume. Actually, probably not if it's with Harrison, because this question is aimed at you, mate. So, favourite outdoor meal to cook?
I know, I had a feeling I was going to avoid this question today. I seem to get this question every time I do a talk. Tonight, we've not touched on the cooking side too much. I'll escape.
You tried your best, mate, by not.
Yeah, one of those. But no, great question. Thank you. It's a very difficult one. It's as I always answer quite politically, sort of politician like at the times. It's kind of, I generally just love the aspect of cooking. I find it quite a mindful practice, quite an absent-minded activity in play. But I especially love cooking for other people. So I love that sharing, almost like giving aspect of something. Especially if someone says, I really love a nice curry, or I love a stew, and then I make that stew and try and make a twist or even a unique twist, I guess, of in the outdoors with me, and providing that sort of gift to somebody else. So I think, again, that food as a conduit, I really enjoy that sort of ideology to that. So I've not answered that, but if I was really pushing, I suppose I'd go more sort of Greek cuisine in there, sort of thing, or perhaps South Asian cuisine. I tend to go to quite often. But in reality, I mean, perhaps the Instagram world, you can't cook the same thing too often because it'd be a bit of a boring account otherwise. But then at home, perhaps it's also something that, I like trying new things sometimes. I like sort of pushing new boundaries, learning new things, not getting comfortable in situations too. So trying a new technique, a new cuisine, a new ingredient. So it's forever changing. But always difficult for a cook or chef. I'm very much a cook to answer that.
Good answer, mate, by not answering it. I like it. You are a politician. I love it. Thanks, Harrison. And by the way, I believe Isaac and myself both love 3-course meals. I know you like cooking.
4 courses.
4 courses. Yeah, sorry, out there. So I've got a few other, quite a load of others. We've got, thank you so much. I feel so privileged to have heard both your stories. To Isaac, your best daily practice for individuals, I assume, to support the environment, maybe some that are less known about.
Yeah, daily practice to support the environment is speak up, speak out. You know, if you come up, you know, with some news or some stories, or you read something, or you know that someone is maybe you know, throwing trash out their car window, tell them you're throwing trash out your car window, pick it up. And then, or if they don't pick it up in front of them and be like, you know, I'm put it away. It's not that anything to be ashamed of, but it's speaking up about it is one of the biggest I guess movers that you can have. And it's the same as mental health.
Yeah, definitely love that. Love that. Great answer. So next one I've got, so Samantha said that it's really interesting, guys, really powerful stuff. Thank you for sharing. I started my journey from burnout, training as a forest therapy practitioner to inspire others to get curious again in nature and make those powerful connections. Great to see so many angles to get people connected back into the outdoors. And that's so cool as well. And because you're both coming at it from a completely different angle, but you are in the outdoor space. So yeah, I think one of the things that's coming out of this is the space is a big one.
Yeah.
Plenty of room for everyone.
That's what I love about nature. It permeates through everything we do. So everyone will have some form of connection. It's just finding what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question I've got here is to you both. Have you ever struggled with anxiety of getting outdoors?
Yeah.
So how did you overcome it?
So anxiety, as in I'm scared to get outdoors, is that the question? Or is it anxiety of I need to get outdoors, but something's stopping me?
I'm not sure.
It's like the text thing, isn't it? Sometimes you're
Yeah.
not sure.
Pete, if you could, as in struggling to get outdoors.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have. That's kind of what happened to me at university. I was so prioritizing everything but my well-being and getting outdoors. I focused on delivering what my goals were rather than my well-being. So I had anxiety over the fact that if I did anything other than work on my screen, it was, you know, going to create a bit. I was coming up with stuff, you know, it's going to create some real destruction in my life, right? So I was scaring myself from doing anything other than that. So that's probably one of the ways I was dealing with some real difficulties in getting outdoors. Sometimes I do it now. I get into the work trap. I'm like, oh, I've got this deadline. I've got to get this done. And I got to think back to, you know, back to 10 years ago and be like, no, this is where it all started. It all started like this. No, get outside, come back to it afterwards. The work will always be there. That's what I always say now.
Man, and yeah, absolutely love that. Yeah, it never goes away, does it? Never goes away.
But also don't go always outdoors and do nothing as well. You can also have your own problem, can't you, if you don't get any work done because you're just walking around.
Absolutely. I've got a few more questions. Actually, seeing that you've answered that one so well, I'm gonna go into the next question. So, yes, a Tales to Inspire live on the mountain. That sounds like a plan, Harrison. Yes, get it done. You name the mountain, as long as it's not any of the big ones, mate. We can get the equipment we need to do anything really, as long as it's accessible. Snowdon, there's a train that goes up there, so that we can go there.
Cribcock.
Yeah, yeah. Some people can get up that way as well if they want. Right, question for you both. So I know we've got a little bit of time left. So question for you both, and it's a great question. Given how both of your stories talk about profound healing through nature, have you found that your relationship with the people in your life who do not value nature in the same way have changed in any way? AKA those who haven't found nature yet. How have you found those relationships change? Have you not?
I'll start with this one, shall I? I think it's yeah, I think change maybe is an interesting one to sort of that last point. I think certainly there are people in my life still that, you know, some perhaps don't get it, some do get it. I think being in this space of meeting people in the outdoor industry, whether that's been through social media initially, as it generally was, or people now meet a lot of talks and things, are generally quite like-minded people. There aren't many people there that are kind of going, oh, I'll try that. The corporate side of things is very different. I think you're very much encouraging some people in the workplace to utilize the outdoors more because you've seen the benefit. But I also think it's something that, you know, the outdoors tends to be, and time in the outdoors in any retrospect, I think, is going to generally provide a positive benefit for anybody. But as with all these things, of course, it's not literally a miracle cure. There's not sort of thing that things don't work the same for everybody. So someone might really oppose their time in the outdoors. It does feel as if it's somewhere we're meant to be, but then perhaps it takes more convincing. But in my life, I think I've certainly found the way I interact with certain friends has definitely changed in that play, where at one point it might have been, it was probably me, my influence, to be fair. Let's just go to the pub all day long, or even let's go to the pub in a nice area so it looks beautiful while we sit in the beer garden. But now it's probably more likely to go on the hillside for a bit, and then we might still go there afterwards. I just tend to have a Coke or an alcohol-free beer, and then they have a couple of beers afterwards. But it's more about the time spent together, I think, rather than the other bit. So it becomes more of the overarching sensation, but generally doing activity together, I think, is always beneficial. And I've also seen people that have maybe reached out to me, perhaps that you wouldn't have expected to come along to those paths. So perhaps they've asked for maybe advice in how to get into the outdoors, advice maybe for getting out, or want to join you on one of the walks that perhaps wouldn't have come to it beforehand. Even some very unlikely ones that I thought friends who wouldn't even be interested, that I probably didn't even ask, to be fair. I've then gone, look, could I join you on one day? I'd quite fancy that. Perhaps they have those barriers sometimes of not knowing where to start as well. When in reality, it's just, it's often just getting out your front door and just going anywhere really and finding some green space. So it's definitely changing that space. And I think perhaps even family wise too. I mean, even sort of my mum, things, we grew up in Cumbria as well, probably neglected, what was on the doorstep a lot. Like me, I mean, although takes her dogs out every day for a walk, it's definitely not the time in the hills, for example, for such a thing, which we have on our doorstep. Whether now she's kind of itching to sort of come and join me on those aspects too. So it's sort of established new activities within existing relationships for me, I think, as well as meeting some great people who found the outdoors for similar reasons, like Isaac in that space. I mean, like Mel who asked the question actually. So yeah, it's, I suppose, yes. This is the short answer.
Thank you, mate. And I know we're up in time, but Isaac, do you have anything quickly on that point in terms of friendship, relationships, or people and that change?
Yeah. So I made time in nature non-negotiable, because it was, my lifeline. So I made it pretty clear to all my friends, family, and everyone that, if nature calls, nature calls. I'm out. I'm going. You can come with me. So I had to make it clear in that sense. But most people, as long as they're not getting taken on to, row across the ocean or something, all these other endurance challenges I do, are happy to go for a walk with me outdoors.
Amazing. Oh, guys. So I want to say,
no, he even made me walk out in the rain when I went and met him down in Devon too. I wanted to go and sit in a coffee shop for the day, and he said, "No, let's walk and talk and have a coffee." I was going, "Oh, come on, just."
It's a beautiful place. Come on, let's go have a walk.
Doesn't hold on to grudges, Harrison doesn't, as you can see. It's like a comedy sketch, this is. I don't know how to apologise. I don't know what to say. Thank you. I apologise to everyone. It's great. Oh, amazing. Honestly, you two are amazing. And I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who's joined today. Honestly, it's been such a great evening. It's so interactive. If you do have any other questions, I'll be sending an email out tomorrow. If they've got questions for Isaac or for Harrison directly, as long as Isaac and Harrison are all right with that, I'll forward those questions on to you and we can get them answered. And I'll put the newsletters on there. So if you want to know more about our ambassadors, who they are, what they're up to, and any of the speaking opportunities that they've got with us, just reach out, sign up to our newsletter. We've got our next evening, which is 17th of April, which is an evening with our change makers, which is going to be amazing. It's in Manchester, but there's going to be loads more coming. One of the things that I'm really concentrating on doing is promoting our ambassadors more. I've realized that our community, as much as we supported 6,500 people with young people and adults with the workshops we've done, the key community for us, and it's only a light bulb moment that's come recently, is our ambassadors, is our 160 people who've shared their stories. It's something really special. And something that I'm trying to work on right now is how do we connect them together so then we can do something even greater. So not figured that out yet. Any suggestions, please send them my way, because I'm currently in a little bit of a problem solving mindset with that as well. So thank you so much, Isaac. Thank you so much, Harrison. You're both amazing. Thank you everyone for joining. Have a wonderful Wednesday evening and please take care.